I stood on the porch of my 700-square-foot A-frame, watching the convoy snake up the snowy driveway. First my father's SUV, then a moving van that looked big enough to swallow my entire cabin whole. My brother Joshua stepped out, spinning in a circle, looking for a mansion that wasn't there. "Where is the estate?" he shouted, his breath clouding in the freezing Denver air. "Where is the East Wing? Where do we sleep?" I didn't shout back. I just slid the deadbolt home with a loud metallic click. "You don't," I said. Before we unleash this chaos, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the world. I'd love to see who's tuning in today. To understand why I locked that door without a shred of guilt, you have to understand the ledger I've been keeping in my head for 31 years. I wasn't just a daughter to Joseph and Angela. I was an insurance policy. I was the rainy day fund they dipped into whenever their golden child Joshua decided to set his life on fire. The final entry in that ledger, the one that made me close the book forever, happened 4 years ago. I was working double shifts at a garden center, scraping mud out from under my fingernails every night, saving for my landscape architecture certification. I needed $7,200. It took me 14 months of eating rice and skipping heating bills to get there. I had the money sitting in a joint savings account my mother had insisted we keep for emergencies since college. I went to the bank on a Tuesday to cut the check for my tuition. The teller didn't even look up when she told me the balance. $12.40. I didn't scream. I didn't make a scene. I walked out to my car and called my mother. I asked her where the money was. She didn't apologize. She didn't panic. She sounded annoyed that I was asking as if I were a creditor calling too early in the morning. "Joshua needed equipment," she said. "He's starting a crypto mining operation. It's the future, Madison. He needs a win." "That was my tuition," I said. "That was my future." And then she said the thing that broke me. The thing that revealed the entire architecture of our family. She sighed a long martyred sound and said, "You're strong enough to start over, Madison. You always figure it out. Joshua isn't like you. He needs help. Why are you being so greedy when your brother is trying to build something?" That is the trap of normalized cruelty. My mother didn't see herself as a thief. In her mind, she was Robin Hood. She was taking from the rich, me rich in resilience, rich in work ethic, and giving to the poor, Joshua, poor in character, poor in effort. She had normalized the idea that my stability was a resource to be harvested for his failures. She genuinely believed that sacrificing my dreams to fund his delusions was the moral thing to do. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I realized in that moment that I wasn't a person to them. I was a natural resource. Like a forest they could clear-cut whenever they needed lumber. The crypto mining rig sat in their basement for 3 months before Joshua sold it for parts at a loss. I never got my money back. But I did get something else. I got clarity. I realized that if I wanted to build a life, I had to do it in secret. I had to build walls they couldn't climb and lock doors they didn't have keys to. So I started over. I saved every penny in a new account at a new bank with paperless statements that went to a secure email. I built my credit score like a fortress, and when I finally bought this A-frame miles away from their chaos, I didn't tell them, because you don't give the termite the address to your new house. But standing on the other side of that door, I knew the silence wouldn't last. They hadn't just come for a visit, they had come to collect, and I was about to find out just how entitled they really were. I unlocked the deadbolt for a second, not to let them in, but to step out and pull the door shut behind me. I wasn't going to let them cross the threshold. I wasn't going to let their chaos infect my sanctuary. I stood on the small wooden porch, arms crossed against the biting wind, and looked at the 4 people who shared my DNA but none of my reality. My mother, Angela, was still smiling, but it was a brittle, frantic expression. She was looking past me at the small A-frame, her eyes darting around as if searching for a hidden switch that would reveal the rest of the house. "This is charming, Madison," she said, her voice high and tight. "Is this the guest cottage? Is the main house further up the road?" The listing said something about a sprawling estate. "There is no main house," I said. "This is it. 700 square feet, 1 bedroom, mine." The smile dropped from her face like a mask falling off. My father Joseph stepped forward. He looked older than I, remembered his face gray and drawn, but his eyes held that familiar simmering demand. He didn't look at the mountains or the view. He looked at me like I was a vending machine that had just eaten his dollar. "We sold the house in St. Louis, Madison," he said. The words hung in the freezing air. "What?" "We closed last week," he continued, as if discussing the weather. The truck is full. We have nowhere else to go. We need to get settled. I looked at the moving van. It wasn't just luggage. It was their entire lives. They hadn't just come for a visit. They had burned the ships. Why would you sell the house without telling me? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Joshua stepped up, pushing past our father. He looked frantic, his eyes wide and bloodshot. Because of the legal fees, okay, the lawsuit from the crypto thing. We had to settle. It wiped us out, but it doesn't matter because we have the plan. He pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket pocket and shoved it toward me. It was a printout of a real estate listing. A massive timber-framed lodge about 10 miles from here. 5 bedrooms, 4 baths, a 3-car garage. The price was listed at $985,000. This is the Oak Crest Estate, Joshua said, tapping the paper. We put a deposit down 2 weeks ago. $2,500. It's perfect. There's a suite for Mom and Dad, the basement is fully finished for me and Brianna and the baby, and you get the master loft. It's turnkey. I stared at the photo of the mansion. It looked like a hotel. It looked like a prison. I didn't agree to this, I said. I didn't put a deposit on this. We did it for you, Angela interjected, stepping closer, her perfume cloying in the thin air. We used your old information to secure the hold. The realtor is expecting you on Monday to sign the mortgage papers. Your credit is perfect, Madison. We checked. You qualify easily. My stomach turned over. They checked. They had run my credit. They had found a house. They had sold their own home. And they had driven halfway across the country with a moving van, banking everything on the absolute certainty that I would just say yes, because I had always said yes. Because Madison fixes it. Madison pays. Madison absorbs the shock so the golden child doesn't have to feel the impact. I'm not signing anything, I said. I bought this cabin. This is my home. I am not buying $1 million commune for you to live in. Joshua laughed, a sharp barking sound. Don't be dramatic. You can rent this place out. Or sell it. We need the space. We're family. Now move, it's freezing out here. Let's go inside and call the realtor. He reached for the doorknob behind me, assuming, as he always did, that my no was just a speed bump on the way to his yes. He reached past me as if I were a piece of furniture blocking the hallway. That was the mistake. He thought I was still the resource. He didn't realize I had become the wall. I didn't step aside. I stepped forward. I placed my hand flat against the doorframe, effectively sealing the gap he was trying to force his way through. You aren't hearing me, Joshua, I said, my voice dropping to a register I usually reserved for contractors who tried to cut corners on foundations. You sold your house on a gamble. You bet everything on the idea that I would remain obedient. You lost. His eyes bulged. For a second, I thought he might actually hit me. But he didn't. He flinched. Because bullies are only brave when they think the door is already open. I took that half-second of hesitation and used it. I stepped back, swung the heavy oak door shut, and threw the deadbolt. The sound echoed through the small cabin like a gunshot. Then I engaged the chain lock. Then I turned the privacy lock on the handle. 3 layers of steel between me and the people who raised me. Open the door, Madison, Joshua screamed, his fist hammering against the wood. Open the door, or I swear to God I will break it down. Try it, I said to the closed door. It's solid core. You'll break your hand first. I walked to the front window and peered through the slat of the blinds. It was a siege. They hadn't left. They had retreated to the driveway, forming a huddled circle near the moving van. My father was pacing, kicking at the gravel, his breath coming in angry white puffs. My mother was weeping, clinging to the side mirror of the SUV as if it were a life raft. Brianna was sitting in the passenger seat of the van, rocking the baby, looking terrified. But my eyes fixed on Joshua. He was stomping back and forth, gesturing wildly at the cabin, his face contorted with rage. And that was when I saw it. The illusion of power in an empty wallet. For 30 years I had been afraid of him. I had been afraid of his volume, his demands, his status as the golden child. I had always assumed he was strong and I was weak. But watching him through that glass, shivering in a thin jacket because he hadn't packed for the mountains, I realized he wasn't strong. He was terrified. He wasn't screaming because he was powerful. He was screaming because he was broke. He had no job. He had no house. He had a wife and a baby and a mountain of debt, and the only asset he had ever truly possessed, my compliance, had just evaporated. He looked small. He looked like a man who had been playing poker with Monopoly money and had just been asked to settle the tab. My phone began to vibrate on the kitchen counter. It danced across the surface with the intensity of their panic. Mom, you are killing your father. He is holding his chest. If he has a heart attack, it is on you. Joshua, we are freezing. Let the baby in at least. You monster. Dad, this is a misunderstanding. Open the door so we can explain the financing. We just need a signature. I didn't answer. I didn't type a justification. I didn't engage with the emotional blackmail. I picked up the phone, swiped past the barrage of notifications, and dialed the non-emergency line for the county sheriff. 911, what is your emergency? This isn't an emergency yet, I said, my voice calm, steady, clinical. But I have 4 trespassers on my property who are refusing to leave. They are becoming aggressive. I need a deputy dispatched to removing them. Are the individuals known to you, ma'am? Yes, I said. Their family. I hung up the phone and walked to the coffee pot. I poured a cup, wrapped my hands around the warmth, and waited. The siege had begun, but the fortress was holding. I sat at the kitchen island, the sheriff's ETA burning on my phone screen. 12 minutes. Outside, the shouting had died down to a sullen, muttering vigil. They were waiting for me to break. They were waiting for the guilt to crack the door open just an inch. But I wasn't thinking about guilt. I was thinking about the deposit. Joshua had said they put down $2,500. He said the realtor was expecting me. That phrasing had been itching at the back of my brain like a mosquito bite. The realtor is expecting you. Realtors don't hold million-dollar properties on a maybe from a broke family living out of a moving van. I unlocked my phone and called my lawyer, David. He had helped me close on the cabin, and I had kept him on retainer specifically for the fallout I knew would eventually come. He answered on the second ring. Madison, everything okay? I need you to check something, I said, my voice steady but my pulse hammering in my throat. My brother mentioned a property. The Oakrest estate. He said they put a deposit down in my name. Can you check the MLS or reach out to the listing agent? I need to know if my name is actually on anything. Give me 5 minutes, he said. I waited. I watched the snow begin to fall, dusting the windshield of my father's SUV. Angela was huddled in the front seat, likely composing a monologue about ungrateful daughters. Joshua was pacing again, kicking my fence. David called back in 3. His voice was different. He didn't sound like a lawyer anymore. He sounded like a man about to deliver a death notification. Madison, are you sitting down? Tell me, I said. I called the listing agent. She was very confused. She said the contract is already binding. The earnest money was wired 3 days ago. I didn't wire any money, I said. I know, David said. The funds came from a bridge loan account with Sovereign Bank, opened last Tuesday. The room seemed to tilt. I don't bank with Sovereign. The loan is in your name, Madison, David said quietly. The application used your social security number, your previous address, and it was signed via DocuSign using an email address that looks like yours but isn't. maddie.callahaney-8@gmail.com. I stared at the phone. That wasn't my email. That was the email my mother had set up for me when I was in high school for college applications. She still had the password. The silence in my head shattered. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't just them being pushy. They hadn't just driven here hoping to convince me. They had stolen my identity. They had forged my signature on a loan application for a down payment I couldn't afford on a house I didn't want, anchoring me to a debt that would drown me. They opened a line of credit in my name, I whispered. Yes, David said. That's identity theft, Madison. That's bank fraud. If we don't report this immediately, you are liable for that loan. And if the sale falls through, you're on the hook for the damages. I looked out the window. I looked at my mother shivering in the passenger seat. I looked at my father, the man who demanded respect while robbing his daughter blind. They weren't just toxic, they were criminals. They had looked at my life, my credit, my hard-won stability, and decided it was theirs to loot. What do? I asked. You have to file a police report, David said. Right now, you have to press charges. If you don't, the bank will assume you authorized it. There is no middle ground here, Madison. Either they go to jail or you go bankrupt. I hung up the phone. I looked at the door. The last thread of hesitation snapped. I wasn't protecting my family anymore. I was witnessing a crime scene. The sheriff's cruiser turned the corner, lights flashing silently against the gray sky. I grabbed my coat. I grabbed the folder where I kept my real ID, my real deeds, the proof of who I actually was. I walked to the door. I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt the cold, hard clarity of a judge passing a sentence. I unlocked the deadbolt. It was time to go outside. I stepped out into the falling snow, the cold biting at my exposed face. The wind whipped my hair, but I didn't feel the chill. I felt the heat of the anger I had suppressed for decades. As the sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway, the dynamic shifted instantly. My father straightened up, attempting to summon the authority he used to wield over me. My mother wiped her eyes, composing her face into the mask of a bewildered grandmother. Joshua stopped pacing, his bravado evaporating in the presence of a uniform. 2 deputies stepped out. One approached me on the porch. The other walked toward the group huddled by the van. "Ma'am, you called about trespassers," the first deputy asked. "Yes," I said. "This is my property. These people are refusing to leave." "Isabel Madison," my mother wailed, switching names in her panic. "Officer, she's our daughter, we're just trying to visit." "Ma'am, step back," the second deputy warned, hand resting near his belt. My father stepped forward, trying to use his reasonable man voice. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. We have a contract on a property nearby. Our daughter is just upset because—" "Officer," I interrupted, my voice cutting through the wind. "I'd like to file a report for identity theft and fraud." I handed the deputy the folder. Inside were the printouts David had sent me. The fraudulent loan application, the forged DocuSign log, the credit inquiry from a bank I didn't use. "These people used my social security number to open a line of credit without my consent," I said, pointing at my parents and brother. "They forged my signature to secure a loan for a house I never agreed to buy. They are currently trespassing on my property after being asked to leave multiple times." The deputy looked at the papers, then at my family. The misunderstanding defense died in my father's throat. He looked at the documents, then at me, his eyes widening in genuine fear. He realized finally that I wasn't playing a game. I wasn't throwing a tantrum. I was prosecuting them. "Is this true?" the deputy asked my father. It was a bridge loan," my father stammered. "For the family. She was going to sign." "Did she sign it?" the deputy asked. My father looked at the ground. "That's fraud, sir," the deputy said. My mother let out a sob, collapsing against the side of the SUV. "We did it for you. We did it so we could all be together." "You did it because you're broke," I said. "You did it because you thought you owned me." The deputies began to separate them. They asked for IDs. They ran names. The reality of the situation settled over the driveway like the snow. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a crime scene. I looked at the minivan. Brianna was still in the passenger seat, clutching the baby. She wasn't looking at Joshua or my parents. She was looking at me. Her eyes were wide, terrified, pleading. She hadn't said a word the entire time. She was trapped in their chaos just like I had been. I walked down the steps, past my sputtering brother, past my weeping mother. I walked to the passenger window of the van. Brianna flinched as I approached. I pulled a $50 bill and a piece of paper from my pocket. I had written down the address of a motel in town. "Brianna," I said through the glass. She rolled the window down an inch. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear, Madison. Joshua told me you agreed. He said you wanted us here." I believed her. Joshua lied to everyone. Why would his wife be any different? "Take this," I said, sliding the money and the note through the crack. "There's a motel 10 miles back down the road. It's clean. It's warm. This pays for one night for you and the baby." "What about Joshua?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Joshua is not my problem," I said. "And frankly, he shouldn't be yours either. But that's your choice." I looked at my brother, who was currently trying to explain to a deputy why he didn't have a job or a permanent address. "If you stay with him," I said to Brianna, "this is your life. Forever, cold driveways and police lights. If you leave, maybe you have a chance." I turned back to the deputies. "I want them removed from my property. Now." "Yes, ma'am," the deputy said. "Folks, you need to get in your vehicles and leave. If you return, you will be arrested." I watched them scramble. The arrogance was gone. The entitlement was gone. They were just people fleeing the consequences of their own actions. My father glared at me one last time as he got into the SUV, a look of pure hatred. My mother just wept. Joshua kicked the tire of the van before getting in defeated. As they drove away, taillights disappearing into the snow, I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel guilty. I felt light. I walked back up the steps to my porch. I brushed the snow off the railing. I unlocked my door and stepped into the warmth of my small, quiet, empty house. I locked the door behind me. and for the first time in my life, I was truly home. 6 months later, the mountains were green again. I stood on the deck of my A-frame, watching the sunrise paint the peaks in shades of gold and violet. The snow was gone, replaced by wildflowers. My phone buzzed on the railing. I didn't jump. I didn't panic. I just glanced at it. It was an email from the district attorney. The fraud case against my parents and brother was moving to the plea bargaining phase. They were facing probation and hefty fines. My credit had been frozen, scrubbed, and secured. The bridge loan was gone, erased like a bad dream. I didn't have to testify. The paper trail they left was a confession in itself. I deleted the email notification and took a sip of my coffee. Brianna had called me last week. She didn't go back to Joshua after that night at the motel. She took the bus back to Street Lewis, moved in with her sister, and filed for divorce. She told me she finally got a job of her own. She sounded tired, but she sounded free. As for my family, my parents, my brother, I don't know where they are living now. I assume a rental somewhere, or maybe with a distant relative who hasn't learned the lesson I learned yet. It doesn't matter. They are characters in a book I finished reading a long time ago. I looked out at the tree line. For years I thought I was broken because I didn't fit into their picture. I thought I was the cold one, the selfish one, the one who didn't know how to love properly. But standing here in the silence of my own sanctuary, I realized the truth. I wasn't broken. I was just the only one who refused to stay in the burning building. If you are listening to this and you feel like the outsider in your own bloodline, if you are the one always giving, always fixing, always waiting for a thank you that never comes, I need you to hear this. You do not have to set yourself on fire to keep them warm. You are allowed to lock the door. You are allowed to change the locks. You are allowed to build a house that is just for you with no guest room for their chaos. You don't build a life by saving people who are determined to drown. You build it by learning to swim alone. I finished my coffee, walked back inside, and closed the sliding glass door. The silence wasn't lonely. It was mine. If you've ever had to lock a door to save your own life, share this story. You are not alone.